Enjoy listening to this and other great podcasts from Jacob's Tent? Want even more content from us? Download the Jacob's Tent app today and gain access to the latest videos, teachings, and exclusive content all in one location. Stay connected and up to date with everything happening in the tent with the Jacob's Tent app, available on the App Store, Google Play, or wherever you find your apps.
Over the last several weeks, there have been hundreds, maybe even thousands of reports about strange objects in the skies over New Jersey, New York, and other parts of the northeastern United States. Are these objects merely harmless drones, or are they something else? And more importantly, what do they portend? So in this episode of the Weekly Scroll, we're going to take a look at this and what is the message that we as believers can glean from all of this.
Welcome to the Weekly Scroll, sharing biblical thoughts on current events. Scroll through today's top headlines with Bill Cloud as he unravels the political and spiritual implications of the world we live in, all through the lens of Scripture. Now, be encouraged, be challenged, and be ready.
Welcome to this episode of the Weekly Scroll, where we look at the week's news items and we discuss how these current events might have a bearing on believers in these last days. Now, does anyone remember, besides me that is, when you were a kid and watching The Wizard of Oz and being frightened by the scene where the skies are filled with all the flying monkeys who then swoop down, they grab Dorothy, and they carry her away to the witch's castle? You remember that? Well, what I'm going to discuss this week might not provoke the same level of fright as that, but many people, citizens, congressmen, leaders, are becoming increasingly disturbed by what appear to be drones, but are otherwise unidentified flying objects that are flying through the air in New Jersey and parts of New York and other places. In fact, in New Jersey alone, over 1,000 such sightings were reported in just under a month. And since the initial reports began to show up on social media, there have been other reported sightings of these mystery drones appearing in the skies over Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Ohio, Minnesota, and even Southern California. In fact, I read just the other day that drones have also been spotted at a U.S. Air Force base in Ramstein, Germany. Now, these unidentified drones have puzzled and frustrated residents and raised concerns among local and federal authorities, sparking a lot of speculation, a lot of concern over who sent them and why. The FBI, which has received over 5,000 tips, 100 of which they consider to be worthy of further scrutiny. Anyway, 5,000 tips, but they're investigating these, and they say that they don't know the source of the drones, which, if you're thinking, well, the FBI has access to all this information and they don't know where they're coming from, that should really comfort us, don't you say? Now, in New York, Governor Kathy Hochul said she was investigating the matter with federal law enforcement agencies. Senator Chuck Schumer called for action to make it easier for federal, for state, and local authorities to work together to detect and, if need be, quote, bring down, end quote, any drone seen to pose a threat. In Connecticut, Senator Richard Blumenthal called for the drones to be, quote, shot down if necessary. Those are Democrats, folks. In New Jersey, State Representative Dawn Fantasia said from 4 to 180 such aircraft have been reported to authorities since November 18th, and these drones typically appear from dusk until 11 p.m., and she estimates that there are, on average, 92 sightings every night. Representative Chris Smith, a Republican from New Jersey, has asked the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas why the drones' origins are still unknown, and why can't we follow them? He added that, quote, many of them seem to be coming from the ocean. This uncertainty has prompted New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy to ask the Biden administration to put more resources into an investigation of the drones. He posted on X that, I wrote to POTUS to express my concerns about reports of unmanned aircraft systems in and around New Jersey airspace. Since existing laws limit the ability of state and local law enforcement to counter UAS, more federal resources are needed to understand what is behind this activity. Now, that being said, Governor Murphy was very careful to stress that there is no evidence to suggest these UFOs pose any kind of a national security threat or a public safety threat, or that they have a foreign connection. Now, that position stands in stark contrast to the view presented by another leader from the state of New Jersey. New Jersey Congressman Jefferson Van Drew says he knows exactly what's going on. He believes that Iran, in cooperation with China, is behind the mystery. He said this, "I've gotten to know people, and from very high sources, very qualified sources, very responsible sources. I'm going to tell you the real deal. Iran launched a mother ship probably about a month ago that contains these drones. These drones should be shot down." Now, countering that opinion, the Defense Department said that while these are not U.S. military drones, there is no evidence that these activities are coming from a foreign entity or the work of an adversary. As for the Biden administration, their position seems to be, we don't know what they are, but we know that they aren't a threat. Administration and national security officials representing the FBI, the FAA, the NSC, the DHS, the DOD, all these together have acknowledged their attempts to discern the origin of these activities, but as one FBI official put it, "I think there has been a slight overreaction." However, one DOD representative did add this, quote, "We have not been able to locate or identify the operators or the points of origin." Now, I'll interject here, and this is my opinion, that this is very hard for me to believe. Of course, a spy balloon from China did manage to float across the entire nation from west to east before it was shot down off the coast of South Carolina. So, is this gross incompetence? Let's hope not. But if it isn't that, then it's more likely that our government does know what these things are, but just aren't willing to tell us what's really going on. And that brings us to this option. Some people believe we're being desensitized to a new technology and to a new fact of life. In fact, one expert in the field of surveillance and intelligence likened the situation to when the B-2 bomber was first being unveiled. Before Americans knew about the new stealth bomber, sightings were being reported all across America. And so then, in similar fashion, it is theorized that the United States is getting ready to use this new technology in actual military applications all over the world. In advance of this alleged mobilization, the U.S. is believed to be experimenting and at the same time sending a warning to countries like Russia and China, as well as a heads up to the American people on what to expect in the near future. Former CIA operations officer Laura Ballman also suggested the drone sightings might be a U.S. operation to, quote, test either evasion technology or detection technology in urban areas. Ballman added that she is, like everybody else, troubled by why the United States government has not been forthcoming with the information regarding the drones. President-elect Trump chimed in on all of this. He feels the government knows exactly what they are, but the government isn't being honest with the American people. He said, quote, "Our military knows and our president knows, and for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense. I can't imagine it's the enemy, because if it was the enemy, they'd blast it out." And then Trump also posted this online, "Let the public know and now. Otherwise, shoot them down." Now, officials are warning people not to take that type of drastic action because to do so would result, probably, in jail time. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby said that some of the sightings might be lawfully operated planes or helicopters that are being mistaken for drones. Yet Kirby was also compelled to admit that, quote, "the reported sightings highlight a gap in authorities." And what he means by that is one agency doesn't know what the other agency is up to, and then that disconnection has the potential to lead to a lot of chaos, kind of like what we're seeing right now. And it's on that note that a top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee expressed a great deal of frustration at the lack of communication, saying, the answer, we don't know, is not a good enough answer. When people are anxious, people will fill a vacuum with their fears, anxieties, and conspiracy theories. And it is that notion, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to what I'd like to emphasize regarding this story. Fear, uncertainty, imaginations running rampant, and what that portends for the future, specifically as it relates to the last days. You see, as it turns out, believers aren't exempt from the attraction of conspiracy theories. When we can't get specific answers to what we believe to be important questions, we have been known to formulate our own and sometimes fanciful explanations for mysterious things. For instance, and I know that this is going to incite some of you to speak out, but there are believers who are quite convinced that NASA conspired with a host of other government agencies in order to convince the world that the Apollo moon landings were real. Because, as the theory goes, Neil Armstrong did not walk on the moon. All of that was, so say the conspiracists, all of that was faked. In times past, we have been fascinated. Some people have been frightened by the notion that there are currently camps being set up to incarcerate American citizens, particularly those who are believers. Some people have gone to great lengths to document these camps with maps, photos, etc. And, maybe they exist, maybe not. My intention is not to address the pros and cons of these particular examples or even the examples that you could come up with. My point is that some of these conspiracy theories tend to be intertwined with fear, if not conceived by it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not healthy, nor is it prescribed for those of us who are followers of the Messiah. Fear is not our friend. Just think about what fear did when COVID was unleashed on the world. Yeah, I realize that a lot of people died. In fact, I know people personally that succumbed to COVID, and that is very unfortunate. But I would argue that the greater long-term effects of COVID, some of which are still with us now, came about as a result of fear and not facts. There are churches that no longer exist. And there are many more churches that are struggling to remain open simply because people were afraid to venture out of their homes and to be in a crowd. Fear definitely gripped a lot of people. And in the process, while we're so fearful, we let our local, our state, and federal government get away with a lot. And if COVID was, as some theorized, contrived by a few with a nefarious agenda, in other words, if it was a conspiracy, I would argue that we assisted in its success by giving in to fear. Now, I will concede the reason that some conspiracy theories exist is because there are actual conspiracies at work in the world. There are people who meet in back rooms and conspire to do this or that, and sometimes with wicked intentions. However, that is not justification for God's people to give in to fear or to be carried away with conspiracy theories. Well, Bill, I'm not worried at all about these drones. Well, good for you. But are you and will you be just as resilient when it comes to other threats and other fears? Fear has always been one of the worst opponents of the people of God, and we face it throughout our history. And mainly, I would surmise it's such a great threat to us because it's invisible in the traditional sense. Consequently, it sneaks into our life quite easily if we're not on guard. Again and again, the Almighty tells his people that we are not to fear our enemies. We are to be courageous and to be bold. We're not to fear the giants in our lives. We are not to fear those who appear to be more numerous and more powerful than us. We're not to fear the adversary. We are to fear God. As was said to the prophet Isaiah, "The Lord spoke thus to me with a strong hand and instructed me that I should not walk in the ways of this people, saying, do not say a conspiracy concerning all that this people call a conspiracy, nor be afraid of their threats, nor be troubled. The Lord of hosts, him you shall hallow. Let him be your fear, and let him be your dread." I do find it interesting that the context of this reminder in Isaiah that is to fear God above all is the fact that apparently there were people of God who were motivated to fear threats and to be afraid of the different conspiracies more so than the Almighty. And at the same time, this issue shouldn't really come as a surprise to us. I mean, Scripture is full of all these times when God's people gave into fear. Remember what occurred when the spies brought the evil report. The people of Israel feared the giants and the fortified cities more than they feared the one who had brought them out of Egypt and had led them through the wilderness. And consequently, those who gave into this fear died in that wilderness. Well, I, for one, don't want to die in the wilderness as a victim of mob mentality, and especially a mentality that instills the fear of man or the fear of the unknown into my mind and into my spirit. I want to be able to keep my focus on what I know to be true. And more importantly, I want to keep my focus on who I know to be the author of truth. I don't know for certain what these UFOs are. I mean, I think it's obvious they are not some 20-something techie trying to mess with everybody's mind. I'm pretty sure they are not sophisticated contraptions from other worlds that were sent here to, scope out the earth in advance of an alien invasion. And no, I'm not of the opinion they are demonic fallen angels, as some have theorized. More than likely, there's some government-related experiment that some bureaucrat thought could be run without drawing this kind of attention. On the other hand, maybe it is some sort of government-led deception, actually intended to capture our attention so that we won't notice something else that they really want to keep hidden. Whatever they are and whatever their purpose, I want you to think about the amount of media attention they have received and the curiosity and in some cases, the fear they have generated among the people who've witnessed them. Now, with that in mind, consider what will happen and how people will respond when God begins to demonstrate his power and his might in the heavens and upon the earth. Here's what Yeshua said, "And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them from fear, and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken." Now, did you notice that? Men's hearts will fail them due to the expectation of what is coming upon the earth. In other words, if some people are unsettled by what they are seeing now in the case of these drones, can you imagine what those same people will do or what others will do when the powers of the heavens are literally being shaken, when ominous signs are actually appearing in the heavens, more so than these drones? But I would say that those who will be so moved are those who have no real hope, no real faith. I would recommend that Yeshua was describing those who are still fastened to the things of this world. But those of us who do have faith and who do have hope and have determined within ourselves not to focus on temporal things, nor to, as Isaiah put it, walk in the way of this people. When these things begin to happen, we are to look up and lift up our heads, not to observe the drones, but to look up because our redemption draws near. I'm not of the view that these drones, or whatever they turn out to be, are a sign of the end times. However, I am of the view that society's reaction and society's response to the things we don't have answers to helps us to see how the stage is being set for those things that are to come. In other words, doubt, uncertainty, and a need to, well, as the one gentleman put it, fill the vacuum with fears, anxieties, and conspiracy theories will lead to a great deception. And that is exactly what the adversary, the great illusionist, is counting on, ladies and gentlemen. And so then, don't be deceived and do not live in fear.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to get the latest updates from Bill and check out other podcasts available from Jacob's Tent. And join us next week on The Weekly Scroll. Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to get the latest updates from Bill and check out other podcasts available from Jacob's Tent. And join us next week on The Weekly Scroll.